At 15, Ion had learned something most boys never should: how to survive without asking for mercy. The streets outside the old bus terminal smelled of dust and diesel. That was where he waited every afternoon. Backpack torn, shoes 2 sizes too small, eyes sharp with hunger and pride. School ended early for boys like him, not because they failed, but because life demanded more than books. His mother had died 2 years earlier. His father disappeared long before that. What remained was a rented room, unpaid fees, and a future that seemed to shrink every day. That was when Sarah noticed him. She was 30, returning from work, exhausted but composed. She taught part-time at a local institute, not rich, not powerful, but stable enough to recognize desperation when she saw it. For weeks, she noticed the boy sitting alone, always studying from borrowed books, always refusing help. One evening, rain broke the heat. Ion stood under the bus shelter, shirt soaked, clutching a notebook to his chest. Sarah hesitated, then walked toward him. "Why aren't you at home?" she asked gently. Ion looked up, startled. He didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, "I don't have one that matters." Something in his voice stopped her. That night, she bought him tea and a meal. He ate slowly, embarrassed, eyes lowered. She didn't ask many questions. She already knew the answers. Before leaving, she slipped some money into his hand. "For books," she said. He tried to return it. "I'll pay you back," he said quickly, pride flaring. "I swear." She smiled, not unkindly. "Focus on school first." From that day on, Sarah became his quiet support. She paid his school fees when notices came. She made sure he ate. She pushed him to study when exhaustion tempted him to quit. She never told anyone, never asked for gratitude. To her, it was just the right thing to do. To him, it was everything. Years passed in small victories. Grades improved. Teachers noticed. Opportunities appeared fragile, rare, but real. When Ion turned 18, he received a scholarship offer in another city. The night before he left, he stood at Sarah's doorway, hands trembling. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "I don't even know how to repay you." She waved it away. "You don't owe me anything." But Ion shook his head. His eyes burned with certainty beyond his years. "I will pay you back," he said. "One day, when I become a billionaire." Sarah laughed softly, not mockery, just disbelief mixed with affection. "Just become a good man," she said. He nodded. As the bus pulled away the next morning, Ion watched the city fade. One promise carved into his heart, a promise the world would forget. But he never did.
The bus moved forward as the city slowly disappeared behind him. At 15, he had never traveled this far alone. The seat felt too big, the night too quiet. His fingers tightened around the small notebook in his bag. The same notebook where he had written one sentence again and again. "One day, I will repay her." The woman's face kept returning to his mind. Not as a dream or fantasy, but as a responsibility. She hadn't given him charity. She had given him dignity. And that made the debt heavier than money. Life didn't become easier just because he had left the city. The hostel he stayed in was cold and overcrowded. He studied during the day and worked at night, cleaning tables, carrying boxes, sometimes sleeping only 3 hours. His hands grew rough. His shoulders hardened. But his promise stayed untouched. Years passed quietly. At 20, he was no longer the boy at the bus stop. He had earned a scholarship, then another. Professors noticed his discipline, not brilliance, but consistency. He never wasted time. Never partied. Never dated. When asked why, he would simply say, "I have something unfinished." Meanwhile, her life moved on in a different direction. She never expected to see him again. To her, he was just a boy who needed help, one moment in a long life of responsibilities. She married late, divorced quietly, and focused on work. By 45, she had learned how to stand alone. Strength had replaced softness. She didn't believe in promises anymore, especially those made by children. Sometimes, though, when she passed a bus stop on a rainy evening, she would remember his eyes. Not gratitude. Determination. At 25, his first company failed. Everything he built collapsed in 6 months. Investors walked away. Friends disappeared. He slept on office floors and ate instant noodles. For the first time since he was 15, doubt entered his heart. What if I never become anything? That night, he opened the old notebook. The pages were worn. The ink had faded, but the promise was still readable. He didn't quit. At 28, success came quietly. A risky idea. A single investor. One deal that changed everything. Then another. Then 10 more. Money followed, but he didn't chase it. He chased freedom. By 30, his name was in business magazines. Self-made. Mysterious. Emotionless. They didn't know the truth. On his 30th birthday, he stood in front of a mirror wearing a tailored suit. He looked older than his age. Calmer. Colder. He opened the notebook one last time. Tomorrow, he would return. Not to show wealth. Not to impress the world. But to fulfill a promise made by a poor 15-year-old boy. To a woman who had no idea her kindness had built a billionaire. 15 years had passed since the rainy night at the bus stop. The boy who once bowed his head in shame had become a man who walked with quiet authority. At 30, he owned companies, employed thousands, and signed deals that reshaped industries. Newspapers called him self-made. Rivals called him ruthless. But deep inside, there was still one promise that ruled his life more than money ever did. He never forgot her. Not her face. Not her tired smile. Not the way she had pressed those few bills into his shaking hands and said, "Live well. That's enough repayment." On a calm autumn evening, his car slowed. Near an old district scheduled for redevelopment, one of his projects. As glass towers reflected the sunset, a familiar bus stop appeared at the corner of the street. "Stop the car," he said suddenly. The driver hesitated. "Sir." "Here." He stepped out alone. The bus stop was different now, new lights. Clean benches, but the air felt the same. Heavy with memory. As he stood there, his phone buzzed with calls from executives and assistants. He ignored them all. Then he saw her. She was crossing the street slowly, carrying a worn handbag. Time had changed her, silver threads in her hair. Faint lines near her eyes, but something about her posture. Her quiet dignity made his chest tighten instantly. It was her. She hadn't seen him yet. She stopped near a bakery, glancing at the window, as if calculating whether she could afford a small treat. The sight broke something inside him. For a moment, he wasn't a billionaire. He was 15 again. He walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said gently. She turned, confused at first, then polite, distant. Her eyes scanned his suit, his calm face, the expensive watch. She smiled faintly, unsure why a man like him had stopped her. "Yes." He swallowed. "Do you remember? A boy at a bus stop. Years ago. In the rain." Her expression froze. The world seemed to tilt. Slowly, disbelief crept into her eyes. She studied his face more closely, his eyes. The familiar sadness hidden beneath confidence. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." He nodded once. "It's me." Her hand trembled as she covered her mouth. "You were just a child. And you saved my life," he said softly. People passed by, unaware that destiny had just collided on a quiet street. Tears welled in her eyes, not dramatic, not loud, just honest, restrained emotion. "I always wondered," she said, voice breaking, "if you were okay." "I wasn't," he replied. "Until I became someone worthy of that promise." They sat together on the bus stop bench. For the first time in years. She spoke about her life, how she never married. How work filled the years, how loneliness became routine. He listened, every word carving deeper into his heart. As night fell, city lights glowed around them. "I never expected anything from you," she said. "I didn't help you for repayment." He stood slowly, resolve clear in his eyes. "I know," he said. "That's why I came back." And this time, he wasn't leaving. The night grew quieter after their long conversation at the bus stop. Cars passed less frequently. And the city seemed to lower its voice, as if giving them privacy. Yet between them sat a distance heavier than silence, 15 years of time. Choices, and unspoken sacrifices. He stood first. Not because he wanted to leave, but because staying felt dangerous. "I should go," he said softly, adjusting his coat. His voice was calm, but his heart was anything but. She looked up at him, startled. For a moment, she thought she had said something wrong. Her hands tightened around her bag. "Of course," she replied, forcing a small smile. "You have a different life now." That sentence cut deeper than any accusation. He nodded, unable to meet her eyes. She was right, his life was different. Boardrooms. Headlines. Power. Wealth. People. Who bowed when he entered a room. A world that would never understand why his chest ached. While standing beside a woman the world would call ordinary. Yet nothing about her felt ordinary to him. That night, he returned to his penthouse, but sleep refused to come. The city glittered below him, cold and distant. Every reflection in the glass reminded him of who he used to be. A 15-year-old boy with empty pockets and burning pride, standing in the rain. Promising a woman twice his age that one day he would repay her kindness. He had kept his promise. But the world was now asking him to pay a different price. The next morning, news spread like wildfire. Billionaire CEO spotted with older woman at bus stop. Photos. Speculation. Comments dripping with cruelty. Is she his maid? A gold digger? A secret scandal? He read none of it, but his assistants did. His partners did. His investors did. By noon, the pressure arrived. "This could hurt your image," one advisor warned carefully. "People expect a certain type of partner," another added. He listened. He always listened. But this time, he said nothing. Across the city, she saw the news by accident. On a small phone screen while waiting in line at a grocery store. Her face drained of color as she recognized them. Not as people saw them, but as he would see himself reflected through their judgment. That night, she didn't answer his message. Not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much. She knew how the world worked. She had lived long enough to understand sacrifice. If stepping back protected him, she would do it quietly, like she had always done. Days passed. Then one evening, she heard a knock. When she opened the door, he stood there, no suit, no entourage, no wealth in sight. Just a man holding a single white flower, his eyes steady, unafraid. "I didn't come as a billionaire," he said. "I came as the boy who made you a promise." For the first time in 15 years. She didn't step back. The door closed softly behind them, shutting out the noise of the city and the years that had stood between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The flower rested on the small table like a fragile truth, simple, honest, and heavy with meaning. "I didn't come as a billionaire tonight," he finally said. His voice steady but low. "I came as that 15-year-old boy who once made a promise he was afraid he'd never be worthy of." She looked at him. Really looked at him, not the headlines, not the wealth. Not the men the world admired or judged, but the boy she had once fed. Once defended, once believed in when no one else did. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them together. "I never asked you to repay me," she replied softly. "Not with money. Not with your life." "I know," he said. "That's why I had to." He reached into his coat, not for a diamond-studded box. Not for anything extravagant, but for an old, worn envelope. She recognized it instantly. Her breath caught. Inside was a faded note, written in uneven handwriting. "I will pay you back when I become a billionaire." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "You kept it all these years?" She whispered. "It reminded me who I was doing this for," he said. "Not success. Not revenge. Not applause." Silence settled again, but this time it was warm. I built companies, empires, power, he continued. But every achievement felt hollow because the one person I owed everything to was missing from my life. She turned away, wiping her eyes. You don't understand how cruel people can be, she said. They say I raised you to claim you. They say I waited for your money. He stepped closer, but stopped, giving her space. Let them talk, he said calmly. They weren't there when you chose kindness over comfort. When you helped a boy with nothing and expected nothing back. She finally faced him again. And what is it you think you're repaying now? He took a breath. A life, he said. With mine. Her eyes widened, not in shock, but in fear. People won't accept this. I didn't ask them to, he replied. I spent my whole life proving myself to the world. This is the one thing I'm doing without permission. Slowly, carefully, he knelt, not dramatically. Not for spectacle, but with quiet certainty. I don't offer you rescue, he said. I offer you choice. Equality. Respect. And a love that waited 15 years because it had to grow strong. Enough to deserve you. The ring he placed in her palm was simple. Elegant. Honest. She laughed softly through her tears. You really did it, she said. You paid me back. With your entire future. No, he corrected gently. I'm asking you to share it. For a long second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then she nodded. Not because of money. Not because of age. Not because of the past. But because some promises are so pure, they outlive time itself. And this one had finally come home.